This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from Beijing, this is Global Watch.
Hello and thank you for joining us on Global Watch. I'm Jiao Yang. Our top stories. Leaders of the world's 20 largest economies descend on Bali for the G20 summit. Turkey arrests a suspect in an Istanbul bomb attack that left 6 people dead. US Democrats celebrate control of the Senate with 50 seats following a narrow win in Nevada. And close to $40 billion worth of deals are signed at Airshow China. Leaders from the Group of 20 are meeting on the Indonesian island of Bali this week. The summit will be held on the 15th and 16th with the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. CGTN will be bringing you our special coverage, Options for a Shared Future. Our reporters will join us on the ground for the latest, and we will also have guests from various fields for a closer look at the event. World leaders are arriving in Bali for the Leaders' Summit. US President Joe Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, and Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, are amongst those in attendance. G20 leaders will begin talks on Tuesday. Global health architecture, energy transition, and digital transformation are the official priorities for the summit. They're also expected to address a range of geopolitical issues as well as the food, energy, and climate crises.
Definitely, Bali is ready for the G20 summit. We have been in this particular location for the past few hours, and we've seen so many police and military cars patrolling the streets. As you can imagine, security here is very tight. The Indonesian military have prepared at least 18,000 personnel to secure the area because world leaders have started to arrive in Bali. United States President Joe Biden arrived Sunday night, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is also expected to arrive Monday afternoon. And this road here will most likely be completely blocked off later in the afternoon for the leaders to pass through. President Xi Jinping will be meeting United States President Joe Biden. It's a big meeting, and it really does speak to the theme of G20. Indonesia is promoting the spirit of recover together, recover stronger. And it seems like it is working because this is quite possibly the biggest meeting of the year. And it's happening right here in Bali under Indonesia's G20 presidency.
Well, let's get more from on the ground. My colleague Thambor is in our Bali studio. Hi, Thambor. So what's happening there?
Hello and welcome to our special segment coming to you live here in Bali, Indonesia. I'm Thambor. Heads of state and government from the group of 20 major economies will meet in this tropical island this week, with some attending in person and others virtually. President Xi Jinping will attend the event, and he will also hold a series of bilateral meetings with foreign leaders, including US President Joe Biden. It marks the first face-to-face meeting between President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden since Mr. Biden took office. Now, in my hand, this is a local newspaper, Kompas, one of the major newspapers in Indonesia. As you can see on the frontline article with the title saying, Xi Biden akan jadi sorotan. It means that the bilateral talks between President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden will be on the spotlight of the summit. It also says that there's only one day left until the summit kicks off. And also the whole world is now paying attention to the summit and the tropical island. And the bilateral talks between President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden will be on the spotlight at the same time that the Indonesian president will be promoting the idea of cooperation and equality. And several other heads of state and governments are also arriving on Monday, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. On Sunday, the Business 20 and B20 summit kicked off in Bali. World leaders, CEOs, and executives are gathered here for the event. And this year's theme of inclusive growth is in the line with the G20 theme of recover together, recover stronger. The B20 meetings focus on how governments and companies can create better policies for entrepreneurs and emerging companies. CGTN Sekila has more.
Innovation, inclusion, and collaboration. The B20 summit focused on advancing those areas for entrepreneurs in emerging economies. B20 has created 7 task forces to highlight different and important areas in business. Some of them include trade, education, climate and sustainability, and women in business.
Leaders at the B20 summit say they want real outcomes and real actions that can be delivered to support entrepreneurs in emerging economies. This includes all aspects such as digitalization, financing, and investments.
Digital transformation, one of the main pillars of this year's G20, is a priority for many of the member nations.
So there is an acceleration of digitalization during the pandemic. So this is also the things that can become one of the strategy for economic recovery, because based on our study, many of the small and medium enterprises actually assisted or they use the digital platform as a way for them to survive during the pandemic.
The B20 Forum, along with G20, is committed to help post-pandemic economic recovery. In day 1 of the meetings, the forum successfully officiated their legacy programs across various industries, including green economy and global women empowerment. Silkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Bali.
China Media Group spoke with Indonesian President Joko Widodo ahead of this year's G20 summit. The president shared his expectations for the summit. Take a listen.
Indonesia hosts the rotating presidency of G20 this year, and very soon in November is going to host heads of states and government summit here in this beautiful island of Bali. So we just wonder how's the preparation going and what issues would top the agenda.
Iya, G20 adalah grup negara-negara besar yang juga punya.
The G20 is a group of major world powers. It has enormous influence. We are together facing many problems now. The crisis must be overcome, and the global economy must recover as soon as possible. We must be well prepared. So the G20 summit must produce concrete results, complete practical tasks, and have a real impact on the world. We should avoid empty talks and instead focus on cooperation to create a better future. The current financial crisis, energy crisis, and the food crisis are intertwined, and we should deal with them together, not alone. The G20 has the power to influence future development.
Earlier, my colleague Dong Xue talked with American economist Professor Jeffrey Sachs in Bali. He mentioned how China's economic progress is something the whole world can benefit from. Take a listen.
China says it will continue to work and build an open world economy. You once said that China's entry into the WTO was a tremendous push to globalization. 2 decades later, how do you assess it?
I assess it that I was right 2 decades earlier, that this was a huge step forward. What's ironic, some people in the U.S., especially in the political sphere, think that this was a big mistake because China was so successful, and they view economics as a zero-sum game, that if China's rising, that must be bad for the U.S. This is completely the wrong mindset. China's economic progress is good for China, obviously, but also good for the whole world. It's helped to lift the whole world economy into more prosperity, and China's developed some of the key technologies, very low-cost solar, very low-cost effective wind power, the things we're going to need to decarbonize the energy system. So China's entry into WTO was a huge benefit for China, but also for the whole world.
On the one hand, the Chinese President Xi Jinping and other world leaders call for cooperation in times of change and turmoil. And on the other, U.S. efforts indicate that they might be moving towards decoupling. So you've called for a U.S. foreign policy reset, stressing that this strategy is quote-unquote insane. Where do you think these two countries can meet midway to cooperate?
What's really happened is that China's success has scared American strategists, because American strategists said, we're the big country in the world, we're the unipolar world, we're the world's sole superpower, many ideas, and then along comes China, big economic success, economy growing. I say, great, this is good for the world, but it frightened a lot of American strategists. And so they started saying, maybe we should try to stop this, hinder that, stop exports of this to China, break relations. This is all too much fear, not enough understanding, first, of how economies really work, and second, of what we could do if we cooperate together, because that is really what we need. We face huge common challenges. Climate change is one obvious case. And we should be working together to solve these things. And our politicians and our strategists, so-called, are a little too afraid. They see the world in a non-cooperative lens. And who's up, who's down? China's up, then we're down. No, this is a wrong way to think about things. So we need a framework that understands mutual benefit of cooperation, mutual gains, a positive sum in the world economy.
You've mentioned a couple of times, or even almost every time when you appear in public, that cooperation is the way out.
Stop provoking across the straits with Taiwan and with these trips and of Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others. Calm things down. There's a one China policy. That's the basis of our diplomacy. Don't break things. And I want the U.S. to listen also. Don't break things. I just came from COP27. The whole world is desperate for solutions, desperate for finance, desperate for technology. They're saying we are really suffering from climate change right now. Would the big powers help rather than confronting each other?
Yes. Under the changing political landscape globally, some Western countries are defining China as an aggressive power and targeting China as its national security threat, forming alliances against China in areas of technology, military, to trade. Do you think such measures are warranted?
These people don't know China. They don't understand, and they don't look in the mirror, frankly, because the United States has been engaged in so many wars over the last 40 years, China not in a single one. So if they would just look a little bit, if the U.S. would tone down. In the U.S., we have military bases in 85 countries. Okay, and then you say China is the threat? Come on, both sides. We don't need to see this as a threat. And this reading of China as the great danger, this is an American idea that really comes from the fact that America doesn't want other countries of its size, economic size and so forth, but you don't get to choose. We live in a big world. Everybody wants their place in this world. And I think that if the U.S. would learn more cooperation and less about full spectrum dominance, it would be much better for the U.S. We'd be in many fewer wars, and we'd have a much better time of things.
Chinese naval hospital ship Peace Ark has arrived in Indonesia on a humanitarian mission to provide free medical services to local people. Our reporter Huang Yue has the story.
The Peace Ark set sail again. Upon arriving in Jakarta, medical workers set up tents in the harbor and started treating patients.
My mother has a heart disease, so I brought her here. She's been under treatment for a long time, but we haven't seen any progress. My friend told me a Chinese hospital ship would come, so we came here for treatment. I heard that a Chinese hospital ship came in 2013 and treated a lot of people. I hope they can help my mom.
Iya, nama saya Lani, 60 tahun.
I'm Mrs. Eunice and I'm 60 years old. My family drove 100 kilometers from our home yesterday to attend the welcome ceremony. The medical team told me they started work today, so I came to the cardiology department. I'm grateful to them for helping us.
This is Mission Harmony 2022, PSARC's 10th humanitarian mission since 2008. At the invitation of the Indonesian military, the hospital ship will stay in Indonesia for 7 days. Over 100 Chinese medical workers are on board, with 14 clinical departments and a pharmacy, as well as a helicopter for emergency medical use. The Chinese Navy earlier said surgical treatment and hospitalization will also be offered if necessary. Over 700 local residents came to see the doctors on the first day. Local people say they are impressed by the professional and thoughtful services.
I've never been to China. I got all information about China from social media before today. But this time, I saw firsthand what Chinese people and China's medical services are like.
The PSARC has sailed 240,000 miles over the past 14 years, serving more than 230,000 people in over 40 countries and regions. Huang Yue, CGTN.
The theme this year in Indonesia is Recover Together, Recover Stronger. So it's important that world leaders, putting aside their differences, find new solutions to address global challenges and create new drives for global growth. And that's all from us in Bali. Back to you.
Tambo, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the coming days. Well, certainly a lot of issues for global leaders to be tackling in Bali, and now we want to focus on two interconnected topics, security and development. Now, China says that it adheres to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence as a leading fixture of its foreign policy, and has also proposed 2 major initiatives over the past 2 years to this end to cooperation. So that's the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. So here's a closer look at these.
In the report to the 20th National Congress of the CPC, which concluded last month, Xi Jinping said only when all countries pursue the cause of common good, live in harmony, and engage in cooperation for mutual benefit will there be sustained prosperity and guaranteed security. That explains why China puts forward 2 initiatives, the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. Let's start with the Global Development Initiative, or GDI, which was proposed by President Xi Jinping in a virtual address to the UN General Assembly in September 2021. It responds to the worldwide setbacks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Aiming to build a global community of development, the GDI puts development first and people at the center, and seeks to accelerate the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The initiative is also committed to bridging the global North and South gap and eradicating inequality between countries. The initiative has 6 principles: a people-centered approach, development as a priority, benefits for all, innovation-driven development, harmony with nature, and action-oriented approaches. China is pushing for the translation of the initiative from concept to reality, with concrete results from cooperation projects in 8 key areas: poverty reduction, food security, COVID-19 vaccines, financing for development, climate change, as well as green development, industrialization, the digital economy, and connectivity. The GDI has been warmly received by the international community since its inception. More than 100 countries and international organizations have voiced their support for the initiative, and over 60 of them have joined the Group of Friends of the GDI, launched by China at the UN in January 2022. Months after the GDI proposal, Chinese President Xi Jinping put forward the Global Security Initiative, or the GSI, at the opening ceremony of the Bro-Out Forum. The GSI answered questions like what security philosophy the world needs and how countries can achieve universal security. The initiative is highly relevant as it aims to meet the pressing needs of the international community to maintain world peace and safeguard true multilateralism. The initiative is underpinned by 6 commitments: staying committed to the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, abiding by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, taking seriously the legitimate security concerns of all countries, peacefully resolving differences and disputes between countries through dialogues and consultation, and maintaining security in both traditional and non-traditional domains. It charts the course for all countries around the world to find a path that ensures security for all, by all, and of all. China stands ready to work with all peace-loving countries and peoples to carry out the Global Security Initiative, nurture security dynamics, featuring equality, justice, joint contribution, and shared benefits, and forge a strong synergy to build a community with a shared future for mankind. Despite global challenges, China also stands ready to work with the international community to put these two initiatives into action in a bid for an even brighter future for humanity. Wang Qianhui, CGTN.
Let's get some insights from our guest, Professor Wang Yiwei. He's the director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University of China. Thank you so much for joining us. Professor Wang, I'd like to start by asking you about the rationale behind these two China proposed initiatives, the global development and the global security.
Well, yes, the world suffered of the huge of the development and security deficit. From the Ukraine crisis to the food crisis, inflation, the energy crisis. The reason I think behind is because the globalization, global governance is running of the capital driven. So it's more works for the strong and developing country. So developing countries lag behind. So the world need more public goods in the security and development. So that's the reason Chinese president put forward these two initiative to address these two most important challenges we are facing. We should indeed think holistically and coordinately of those two kind of challenges. So it's more people-oriented and not capital-driven.
So the world is facing a lot of challenges, pandemic recovery-related ones, and also extreme climate events that hindered development. Now, how can the Global Development Initiative help in the face of these problems and actually contribute to real sustainable development?
First of all, I think the development is not just for developing countries, but also for developing countries as well. So this changes the narrative of the developed and the developing. Today, I think developing countries facing the food security, food safety, and the developed countries also suffered with the inflation, energy crisis like in Europe and also in the US. We need to address the developing challenges jointly from the south to the north, global south, global north. And secondly, I think the SDG, the UN Sustainable Goal for 2030, actually, only 8 years later, we will achieve all this goal. But many countries, including the developing countries, actually, they're backward. So China is a first country, I think, 10 years ahead of time to achieve all of these goals, particularly with the lift of poverty. Now the middle class, the shrinking, the many people suffered with the global recession. So we need to put development as a top priority and the people first. And solve this problem systematically and jointly and holistically perspective.
So in terms of the Global Security Initiative, we heard how it proposes that governments find a common path that ensures security for all nations, created by all nations. Now, that all sounds very well, but is this achievable? I mean, just look at all the geopolitical conflicts that we're seeing right now.
Well, that's because of the as I said, the globalization is running of capital, by capital, and for capital, not of the people, by the people, and for the people. So they're just the joint peace and peacemaking and balance for power, even offshore balance. Now the world will be divided, so-called Indo-Pacific, and then decouple with China and decouple with Russia in Europe. So this makes the conflicts and again. I think the global security initiative, basically, we need to address, change our security mindset. That means we should have a common security, not just your security on the base of the other people, other countries' own safety. And also, the security challenges is comprehensive. We need also address comprehensively and join hands between developing countries and developing countries. And also, we need security and development to be sustainable. I think that's the key. The future of to address the two security and development challenges is to build a community of shared future in the security and development. I think that's the maybe the only choice for the human beings in our planet.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it. That's Professor Wang Yiwei with Renmin University of China. Do stay with us on Global Watch. Coming right up.